it helps you with employment. So you start to see some real synergies, some real win-wins here. And you have to think quite differently about this. Not only is it, if you retrofit, is that good for employment, but actually a lot of the people you have to employ in retrofitting are people that are relatively low skill levels. And if you've got areas of unemployment, that's often people with relatively low skill levels. So you start to see real synergies here between doing something, say, with the housing stock, which we might say is too expensive, but hey, if we can give the money to the banks, why couldn't we retrofit the housing stock? Which reduces energy use, reduces emissions, increases our resilience to climate change. It's the poor people that mostly suffer from climate change, particularly the poor and the elderly, provides lots of jobs and employment. So we're hitting one after other of those other sets of criteria about what we say is growth as a proxy for. 250,000 households in Manchester area are in fuel poverty. They should be taken out of fuel poverty as an absolute matter of, it should be one of our, if not our top priority, I would probably put it above climate change. These people should not be in positions of fuel poverty. We need to get them out. And at the moment, there are likely to be more people going into that. So there are lots of things that we can start to do that actually hit all of those. If we could have a rapid transition to a low-carbon transport system in Manchester, why is it we still have congestion in a city in the 21st century? Why have we still got the 1890 Benz diesel engine and internal combustion engines clogging up the streets going into a city, a 21st century city? So we could reduce air pollution, we can reduce bronchial issues, all the health issues that are all part of growth. We reduce accidents, 3,500 people thereabouts killed in cars every year and lots more people injured, and the bronchial issues are way above those. We reduce congestion, which means you increase productivity, good for the economy. You encourage inward investment. Would you rather invest in a place that's congested with all the people stuck in cars and getting to work not very pleased with their day, or would you rather actually they arrive to work refreshed and actually maybe work slightly more effectively? So you start to see tick after tick after tick. Now, I'm going to touch on the airport very quickly here, finish the airport, but only as an example here of joined up in sustainable policy. I'm not saying it should go one way or another, but it's an interesting issue. As all investment, if you invest in one thing, you've got scarce resources, you can't invest in something else. There's an opportunity cost, and that always has to be factored in to whatever you invest in, doesn't matter if it's airports or retrofit, whatever you do. So the question then is, for instance, is expanding airport capacity a good and sustainable use of Manchester's limited resources? Now, you might argue it is, you may argue it's not. I'm not saying one way or the other here. But I'm just suggesting that would the city and would the region benefit more from increased aviation, given that actually we know that increased aviation in the UK is a net drain from tourism. I think roughly, I can't remember the numbers exactly, it's a long time ago now, about every pound that flies in, about £2.36 flies out. So if you increase tourism around Manchester, it will be mostly going out. Now, in terms of inward investment, you might improve that, but actually the data is really poor on that. We need to really be thinking about, does the airport really help with inward investment? But it might do. We just don't know on that. Or would you be better, actually, given that you've got a set amount of money to spend, transforming Manchester into a congestion-free city, trams, hybrid buses, dedicated cycle routes, transporting commuters, it's an idealised world here, very sort of utopian, from their low-carbon, climate-resilient homes into their low-carbon businesses, which would be more attractive for Manchester residents and investors. And we have these choices. We have this joined-up system thinking. But then you think for the council, it should be looking at a programme, because it's moving in this direction anyway, a programme of deep efficiency improvements in the council, buildings and its operations, reduces energy emissions, it increases your resilience to fuel price volatility, which is a big issue. It engenders a much wider spread best practice. So I think there are lots of things that councils could be doing internally. These are costly, but they're costly because we use a certain discount rate, because we use a certain economic model that is shown to fail anyway. So ultimately, and this is a whistle-stop tour, there's some very sort of high-level pointers here around the economic structures. I would say that we must escape the shackles of the 20th century. That's what we have at the moment. We are applying a 20th century mindset to 21st century problems, and that is no longer appropriate. We have to think differently. So that, this demands leadership, engaged teams, and different sets of choices. And in many respects, I think Manchester already hitting the ground on these. To this end, Manchester is already ahead of the game, you could argue here, and there are other places that are also ahead of the game as well. But I think we are, the UK is pushing in the right sort of direction in some respects. You could argue that's changed a bit recently one way or another, but Manchester is ahead of the game in some respects. It has Manchester a certain future, and a refreshed document. It has a climate change strategy. It has the GM Poverty Commission report. These are really good things, but it also has, as a city and as a region, it also has a thriving civil society. And there's the report out in steady state, which we'll be talking about later. But we also have very highly mobilised bottom-up engagement. I mean, you could argue all the people here feed into that idea. So we do have both a city that's trying to do something. We may often not get on one with another, but if a city's trying to do something, we have a bottom-up grassroots that's trying to do things and a wider civil society. But we also have cutting-edge higher education that can feed into this, and we have a history of innovative firsts. So, I quite like that, I've put it quite good. Could climate change in Manchester's cotton? You know, are there new ways to think about what we could be doing? We seem to have all of the things are lined up there, other than the fact that we need to kick-start that. We can't just sit on our laurels and hope it will start on its own. And I'll finally close with a quote I often used. I've stopped more recently, but I think it was appropriate for here. This is from Robert Unger, mostly a philosopher, but also a Brazilian politician. At every level, the greatest obstacle to transforming the world is we lack the clarity and imagination to conceive that it could be different. Now, with the one we know about the future, it will be different. The point about it is, do we want to make it different and good, or just different and see what happens when we get there? And I would argue it's the role of this committee, of the council, of the university I work with, and indeed us as a local and global community, to actually make sure it's a good difference that we make. So on that note, if anyone's interested in my papers, I've just joined the modern 21st century world with a website. Yeah, I put them on the papers on this presentation will be on there, and indeed I'm sure it'll be on the council website. But a lot of the papers are there, and also I've got a Twitter account, whatever that might mean.
Thank you. Thanks, Kevin. What I'm proposing to do now is open to questions and comments from members to Kevin for the next 10 minutes, and then I'm going to invite Mark Hudson to do his short presentation. Burton, I do apologise, there's too many marks in there, to do his presentation. So, members, questions, comments to Kevin, please. Victor, Councillor Chamberlain.
Thank you very much, Professor Anderson. I thought that was fascinating, as your presentation in January was, and also worrying, but hopefully we can start to make a difference now. And I noticed one of the phrases you used was a planned economic recession. And actually one area that I think I would like to see a recession in is meat production, because meat production accounts for 18% of the world's carbon emissions. And it's something that most people actually contribute towards and could make a very significant reduction in their own carbon emissions if we actually just reduced our meat consumption. And this is National Vegetarian Week, so this is a prime opportunity for us to actually take advantage of that opportunity. And I just wondered if you've got any advice about how maybe we could work to cut down on meat production, or advice to encourage other people to.
As a vegetarian of 27 years, but having said that, I used to work on my uncle's farm every Easter, and he has sheep, so it was a strange contradiction. I'm not sure quite how we should go about doing it, and obviously we are consuming less meat in the West. The problem is at the moment is that other parts of the world are trying to consume as much meat as we used to, and indeed we still do. I think you're right, meat is a really important issue. There are things that we know we can do technically with meat. I mean, we just know simple things like just changing from one breed to another breed, but also changing from one species to another. So we know that if you move from beef to pigs or chicken, that you get a much lower overall carbon footprint from that transition. But also, I think eating meat, I would say, and this is not my own, I'm actually an engineer, but my take on this is that if we eat meat, it should be a bit more of a celebration. It's become just too casual. So if you are to eat meat, then I think we should have it as something, it's a bit of a celebration, it's good quality, humanely reared, humanely killed as best you can, and you're having it almost as a treat. But instead of that, at the moment, it's pushed into lots of foodstuffs that we don't really need to have it in, and actually there's no real great social gain from it. So I think the Sunday lunch around the beef, now that may well have changed now, but that sort of thing is perhaps where we should be heading with meat use. But again, there are equity implications of these sort of things. Good quality meat is expensive, and in Manchester, these poor houses couldn't probably afford it. So we have to think about those sets of issues as well. And the one thing I'll just mention, the planned economic recession, which is a very negative sounding term, but at the moment we have an unplanned one. And there's no real sense that that's going to end significantly. And not just at the UK, I mean, across Europe, a lot of people argue that they've gone for some time. If we are going to have one way or another, let's plan it rather than having it unplanned.
I said it was difficult to stick to the Manchester sustainable economy, particularly, although everything's relative. I've got Councillor Stoyer next.